that same day, 2 disciples were traveling to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking to each other about everything that had happened. While they were discussing these things, Jesus himself arrived and joined them on their journey. They were prevented from recognizing him. He said to them, "What are you talking about as you walked along?" They stopped, their faces downcast. The one named Cleopas replied, "Are you the only visitor in Jerusalem who's unaware of the things that have taken place there over the last few days?" He said to them, "What things?" They said to him, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth. Because of his powerful deeds and words, he was recognized by God and all the people as a prophet. But our chief priests and our leaders handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. We had hoped he was the one who would redeem Israel. All these things happened 3 days ago, but there's more. Some women from our group had left us stunned. They went to the tomb early in the morning and didn't find his body. They came to us saying that they had even seen a vision of angels who told them he is alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found things just as the women said. They didn't see him." Then Jesus said to them, "You foolish people, your dull minds keep you from believing in all that the prophets talked about. Wasn't it necessary for Christ to suffer those things and then enter into his glory?" Then he interpreted for them the things written about himself in all the scriptures, starting with Moses and going through all the prophets. When they came to Emmaus, he acted as if he was going on ahead. But they urged him, saying, "Stay with us. It's nearly evening and the day is almost over." He went in to stay with them. After he took his seat at the table with them, he took the bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Their eyes were open and they recognized them, but he disappeared from their sight. They said to each other, "Weren't our hearts on fire when he spoke to us along the road and when he explained the scriptures for us?" They got up right then and returned to Jerusalem. They found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying to each other, "The Lord really has risen. He's appeared to Simon." Then the 2 disciples described what had happened along the road and as Jesus was made known to them as he broke the bread. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. You may be seated.
Will you pray with me? God of love and God of grace, this is your time and we are your people. Open our hearts, our minds, and our lives to your presence that we would receive your word and respond with all that we are. Amen. I debated about telling a couple of the stories I'm about to tell this morning because I'm just not sure you'd believe me if I tell you. We're in interesting territory on the other side of the cross where we have to take for granted people's stories and their witness to what they've experienced. And that's all we got to go on. All of us are here because somebody told somebody a story of how they encountered the love of God and the presence of Christ. And it doesn't always make a lot of logical sense. But something transcendent was revealed to these followers of Jesus. And I hope that that's still available for us to encounter today. I think that really is the work of Easter. It is this revealing moment. Sometimes we use the word apocalypse or revelation for these kind of things. That's not like the end of the world or anything. It means that God is uncovering something. That something is there waiting to be seen and understood and experienced. And the question is, are we attuned to it? Are our eyes able to focus in on it? Are our ears able to hear it? Are our hearts open to receive the gift that's already there waiting? My probably most clear moment of pointing to something like this happened almost about 13 years ago. It was my freshman year of college. I know, do the math, it's fine. We're going to survive that revelation for some of you in the room. And for some of you, you're like, oh gosh, that's still really old, man. I was walking back from studying for an accounting final that would not go well for me when the library closed on campus. It was pretty late at night, and I encountered something that it was very rare at the University of Texas, hook 'em horns. I'm going to stop these interjections, I promise. there was a gentleman walking along the sidewalk around 1:30 in the morning asking for help. Now, that's not necessarily uncommon in Austin for folks to be on a street corner or a sidewalk who need assistance, but at the University of Texas, you had to park your vehicles on the furthest edges of the campus, and you were not allowed onto the campus really via vehicle or really without being a student, without some kind of clear direction of where you were going. And I really hadn't even encountered it after this moment either, but this gentleman was walking along. There was really literally not another soul on the sidewalk, and he tells me his story that it's like, sir, I know you're probably going back to your dorm or whatever, but I need some help. I have walked here from about 3 or 4 miles down the road to a gas station on the other side of the highway, down the road. My van is stuck. It probably needs some maintenance. It definitely needs a tank of gas, and my kid is there waiting. I just need some help. Do you have a car nearby, or can you give me some money to take a bus? I need to get back to my kid. I need to get back to my van. I've been walking around for hours just trying to get a little bit of help. And probably against the better judgment that like my mother or like now my spouse would care for, I said, what else am I gonna do? Okay, yeah, sure. I've got about $40 in my pocket because I was still carrying cash on my person at that point in time. And my 99 Ford Explorer was parked like 3 blocks away. I was like, okay. So I got my car and this gentleman jumped in and we drove the 8 minutes down the road, and we got there and gave him the $40, and he didn't really say much in the car, honestly. There wasn't some great wise conversation or anything, but when we got there, he's just, I really appreciate this. You have no idea. My name's JC, and I am trying to get back home, and I gave him the money, got out. I turned around about a block later just because I wanted to see if he needed anything else, and he just wasn't there. I don't know if he had got his tank filled up and was gone or whatever, but there was something that I cannot explain about that moment to you of this man named JC showing up needing a hand. Right? I'm not making this up. This is not one of these preacher stories I got from the Chicken Soup for the Millennial Soul or something. I didn't. But it was like someone was there wondering, okay, I was a super Jesus-y kid growing up. I was very religious in the youth group. I was leading worship in our campus worship team probably the day before this or something like that. And it was like this moment to say, you say you believe this, will you offer your energy, your time, your money when someone needs it and not just when it makes you look good? I hope the story is truly that this guy and his kid got together and got where they needed to go, but it has stuck with me for these 13 years or so. That I believe the presence of Jesus Christ was there in this guy, this stranger, someone who may have been walking for hours just needing someone to notice and share in some kind of blessing. For me, that's like the road to Emmaus, right? These guys are walking along and all of a sudden, whoa, we've spent all this time with this person. What in the world? This was this holy moment. We can pay attention to that. It's caused me to look at my relationships with people differently, this encounter. Now, I will say I would love to tell you that I enter a lot of my relationships already with the sensors going about, where could Jesus be present? But normally it's after the fact that I've sort of made a fool of myself or been annoyed with someone or had some very real annoyance or human limitation on my part when I am like, oh man, the presence of God was right there across the table and I blew it. But occasionally I have these moments of blessing where I get to see it, I get to say thank you, and I get to stand in the moment to say, surely the presence of the Lord is in this place right now. It has been without fail in any church job that I've had. Within the first couple of weeks, I have some encounter that feels pretty negative on my end with a church member, that I'm like, oh, this is the person that is going to be the thorn in my side. This is the person that I am going to have headaches about. They're going to bother me. And normally that's true for a while. We're human, right? And normally, I'm sure other people are feeling that way about me. I'll own that. But without fail, and the handful of church jobs I've had, I will find myself in some moment, and it's usually around food, where either we're on a mission trip together sharing a meal, or in one point it was one of my grand youth ministry schemes that no kids showed up to, where a parent was also giving their time and we went to grab burgers down the street. And it was that parent. I'm like, come on, you and I are here in this hour together? So that may be a little too real to reveal the curtain. We ministers and pastors are not always the holiest of the holy who are like, oh yes, I'm so blessed to be in everyone's presence. And we're not always the saintly people who you want to be around. But without fail, in these moments of sharing a meal and sharing a story and getting connected with one another, all of my notions and preconceptions and all of my sense of self and what I know ends up breaking apart and disintegrating around me because Jesus is there in this person already. This person that I have been bugged by, this person that I have not wanted to be open to, this person that I have felt hesitant around or outright not great toward. Jesus is there saying, hey, I'm here too. Not just in the big moments where you're up front looking like a rock star for Jesus, or not just in those moments where you're putting the plan together, but in these small moments, I am here to be discovered. Even just in the past week, as I was sitting with a family in grief, and I was thinking, I don't know that I know much about this interaction. I kind of jumped into a funeral late in the game, and I wondered, I don't know where my connection is here. And as the family shared their story, it was just so evident how connected we were already. Not that we were related or anything, but their family story, my family story, the human story. We were bound together by some transcendent thing we couldn't explain through all of these ordinary moments of our lives. The presence of God was there if I would be awake to it. For me, that is the beauty of Easter. In all of these places where God is waiting to be discovered, the presence and grace and transformative power of Christ is there already, available to all of us, within all of us, surrounding all of us, if we're awake to it. I think it's fascinating for the strategy Jesus chose with the resurrection. And really, this is the case with most of his life and his ministry. Why would it change on the other side of death in his resurrection and the continuing of his work? He does not show up on the other side of the empty tomb with the angel armies behind him, or with some triumphant parade, or some show of force and might, with the proof, here I am, for the world to know that this is the right God to believe in, and this is the right way to give your life. He shows up in personal conversations. He shows up with a walk down the road with people who used to walk behind him. He shows up in the breaking of bread, something that we have to do every day for our survival, just to stay alive. And all of some pretty mundane moments, all of a sudden a transcendent experience of God is there. What a beautiful thing. And I think one of the most beautiful things for me about it is that part of what Jesus was doing was saying, this is here before. It's not something Jesus did differently. It's that Jesus showed us God in flesh, incarnate with us, walking around among us, and said, hey, it's been like that before. I'm just a concentrated dose of it right now, and it's going to keep being like this. God is not far away somewhere else. God is not up on high, distant from you, waiting for you to get your act together. God is available and present, and grace is here, already embodied in all of us. What we see through the illusion that this world places upon us that is not of God, that our differences should create conflict, that the forces of might and strength and economics and politics that would separate us and stratify us, that is what defines us. No, God is already with us and for us. And the resurrection makes that really true in all of these ordinary ways. I think the proof for me in that is the witness of how those disciples are changed by those moments, that the illusion fades away. They say, wait a second. Wait a second. We see a little more clearly now that Christ is with us and for us and here among us. I said this last week on Easter Sunday, but I think it may be the greatest miracle of our faith that the disciples who struggled so mightily to follow Jesus when he was physically with them choose to live as if it were more than true with his resurrection on the other side, to live like it was more than true that death didn't have the final say, and more than true that God was moving in this new healing and wholeness way for people. Their lives were the witness in their generosity. Their lives were the witness in how they stood alongside those in grief and pain. Their lives were the witness in how well they modeled God's grace abundantly for all in the way that they welcomed people into their new family of faith. I think that is one of my hopes as Easter people. Sometimes we will throw that around, especially the churchy preacher folks. We're Easter people. Every Sunday's a little Easter. As Christians, we are meant to be changed by the work that is done in Easter, that death does not win, that darkness cannot drown out the light that God has created and spoken and made the universe out of. Can that truth, that love, that light shine through the illusion of this world that we are living in? Not to escape this world, not to say that this world is something fading, but the illusions of the roles we get assigned by this world. We lift up those who are grieving after that tragedy in Sri Lanka where so many were met with violence on Easter. And we lift up our neighbors in San Diego and so many more, too many, who have been gathering for worship and in love of God and met with violence. We lift up those places of pain and stand in solidarity alongside them because we see when you harm any of us, you are harming that image of God. When you're harming part of our human family, you're harming where Christ is already present, being broken again in how we are broken. With resurrection waiting, wondering, is that going to be the final say or not? Will we live like those early disciples did, that this is more than true for us, that this is how we see and live in this world? One of my greatest griefs about the state of our denomination right now in the United Methodist Church, I lament our disagreements over who is in or out with inclusion, especially regarding LGBTQ people, but it's regardless. It is all people. Are we including all people? And yes, we disagree about the Bible and how we read and interpret and live certain scriptures. And yes, we disagree about some of our theology around ministry in the church. But for me, when I look at our disagreements, I think we are disagreeing about how we see where Christ is or isn't present. We disagree about where we identify and recognize the image of God waiting to be discovered that is already there. Us versus them doesn't work in a world where the presence and grace of God is already available within and around all of us. Will we see through that very powerful illusion of the world we live in that says there's something dividing us from one another? Because we know from Romans and we know from Galatians what those early Christians believed, that nothing can separate us from the love of God in Christ. And that through the life, death, and resurrection of Christ, we have certainty, if nothing else, that there's no true difference among us despite the beauty of our diversity. There's no man or woman, slave or free, Gentile or Jew. There's no us in them. Can we transcend the narratives that say fear is okay and violence is okay? Can we transcend the narratives that say I've got to be right and you've got to be wrong? Perhaps the good news of Easter might give us a different way to see, to wake up, to discover where hope is already alive, and we get on board with it. But it is not always in these big, sweeping moments. I'm thankful for those who invest their time in like the judicial council decisions of the Methodist Church and the General Conference. I'm very thankful for that. But I think our neighbors and you and me are going to know that grace of Jesus Christ much more in the simple ways that we love one another well and receive one another well, and the ways that we go out of the doors here with whoever we encounter and meet those neighbors in our families, in our workplaces, in our schools, living as if the resurrection is more than true. Living generously and with grace and with love and with patience. That's going to speak much more to the vitality of God's grace, I'm convinced of that, than some great statement from some authority on high. That is the witness that the early church offered that I think gave efficacy to the faith that gathers us today. How will we respond to the resurrection and see where Jesus is already present among us? We carry this great burden and temptation in our society that when we find ourselves at odds and in disagreement, that there is work to be done there. There's a cultural narrative to say that if we disagree, then surely someone must be convinced of their wrongness and be converted to my rightness. Or when we get religious about it, surely there's something that's less holy or less godly or less Jesus-y there, and so I need to invest for them to be more and change more like Jesus. And friends, I'm just convinced that that's way above my pay grade. That I'm not here to win an argument with you. I'm not here to give you something you don't already have regarding faith and religion. I've talked about it before with mission trips. I shared those stories. I am surprised over and over again that anytime I want to show up for God, God is already there saying, yeah, about that. All I can offer is love and my presence alongside people. The work of transformation and change, I think, is in God's hands. And often it's not going to happen the way that I think it ought to. So am I open to be surprised by the resurrection and the presence of Jesus in this world around me? Am I open to be surprised where in my family, in my community, in my world, Jesus is already present? God is already there lamenting the pain. God is already there celebrating the joy. God is already present in and among each of us in this room in the image that we were created in. The resurrection might give us a different set of eyes to see, a different set of ears to hear, a different ability to wake up to where God has already been and will always be. Let's wake up. I say that to myself, though. I do.